Okay guys, so we're continuing our look now with the blue-black control decks in the Pauper format. There's kind of a progression here, so check out the article puremtgo.com. That's my last plug for this video at least. And kind of what was going on, just to give you a quick summary, is I was looking at the use of blue-black in a post deck minus the Rolling Thunders. This was kind of an interesting deck that I came across, no it is not mine, that uses the burn spell that black is notorious for, Consume Spirit. Kind of the only downside to it is it requires black mana to do that damage. It's kind of like Crypt Rats without the body. But this deck is focused on that burn package, though it does not, interestingly enough, bring in those post package for mana ramp. You do run 2 Consume Spirit, and it is running a Crypt Rats. Kind of an interesting thing about this deck is it is very anti-creature. You notice he has 1 Crypt Rat, there are 4 Echoing Decays, 3 Fume Spitters, you have 3 Snuff Out, 4 Innocent Blood, 4 Spinning Darkness. Very, very heavy on the creature kill. It's an interesting thing. You can use it on your own to, get Grim Harvest going, but this deck really is a stronger, game for a very aggro-heavy environment. If you know you're going to, your local card shop, and a lot of the people there are going to be running mono-white aggro, or goblins, or elves, or any of the above, this is really a fantastic deck to bring for that. It's not a terrible matchup against control. It does have a lot of options in the sideboard, but we'll get to that in a second. So we see, here's the great stuff. You have the Crypt Rats, which is a great thing. It allows for, massive board wipes, as well as doing that extra burn damage for the win. Kind of an important thing is trying to get around the lack of rares like Wrath of God, Damnation, Day of Judgment, etc. And this does it. You bring in the Crypt Rats. Kind of black is the best option for this. It runs 4 Echoing Decay as well. Another great thing for facing down the Storm decks. It's just as soon as that Echoing Decay comes down onto a Goblin token, it's just game over. They usually do not have an answer for it. So having those is fantastic. You also will work well against Izzet decks. They kind of look for Muldrifter beatdown, so they may have 2 or 3 on the table at a time, and you can easily wipe those off with that. Another great card here is Innocent Blood. It's a real cheap cost one. One of the things you easily want to look to throw away is Fume Spitter. Now this deck is kind of creature light. It only runs 10 creatures, so you do have a lot of opportunities where you can play Innocent Blood for its 1 cost and not have to sacrifice a creature because you have nothing on the board. It gets even better if your opponent only has 1 creature, because then it becomes a targeted kill for 1 black. You really can't do any better than that. So moving on with the creature kill, we also have 4 Spinning Darkness, and this is an interesting card. If you take a look here, it allows you to play this card for free as long as you exile the top 3 black cards of your graveyard from the game. And then what it does 3 damage to a creature and allows you to gain 3 life. Kind of a downside on this is it does state that it has to be a non-black creature. And this it's good and bad. I'm a little love-hate on this card. You want it for the mid to late game. You don't really want it so much in the early game. It doesn't kill black creatures, but it will kill the majority of creatures out there. The only things you're really going to run into with a 4 toughness or greater are going to be the Crushers in the Izzet matchup, or Spire Golems in mono blue control, and Drakes, those things. Those 3 cards are really going to be the downfalls, but most of the time Spinning Darkness will hit and will do the damage, will allow a life gain. This also combines really well with the Snuff Out. Snuff Out is a card that I kind of fell in love with recently. You are allowed to pay 4 life as long as you have a swamp, and then you don't have to actually pay the casting cost to play this. It destroys a creature. It is non-black creature. That kind of sucks. Again, if you come against mono black control, then you're sitting here with 7 cards in hand that will not kill a single creature. They are basically just wasted cards. In order to use the life gain off Spinning Darkness, which would be your best option, you would have to use it on your own creature. So one bad thing, but what are the odds that you're going to face mono black every single time? Snuff Out is really good. You have to be able to gain the life off of any of the other spells in order to kind of make up for that life loss. So paying 4, and this is not so bad when you have the ability to use these Spinning Darknesses and gain that 3 per. So that's kind of the kill package. Next thing, you have a lot of draw opportunities. You are running 4 Mull Drifters, one of the greatest draw spells you have available to yourself in this format. You see Mono Blue runs 4 of them. Whoa, I take that back. Is it Control runs 4 of them? It's really just a fantastic draw card if you had the mana available. This deck does run 24 mana. It's not usually a problem. Also in draw, you have the probes. Kind of the thing with the probe is 90% of the time you want to be able to cast this only when you have the mana available for the kicker as well. That's really the upside to probe. There isn't a lot of great things into drawing 3 and discarding 2. But if you have that kicker going, you're forcing your opponent to discard and get control that way. Another great thing I love about this deck is you are running 4 of the Consult the Necro Sages. This allows for draw on yourself, or you can use it to force your opponent to discard 2 as well. I think more times I use it for the discard ability, because I have been running into a lot of control, and you want to force counter spells against Storm. You want to be able to disrupt their hand as well. Another interesting addition would be the Grim Harvest. There's a lot of options there to kind of force that to come back to hand, because you do have 3 Fume Spitters and you have the Mull Drifters you can evoke. One of the really interesting choices also is a single Twisted Abomination. Now this big fatty is fantastic. It's a heavy cost. It's a 5/3 creature. It does have the regeneration ability. I have never used it for swamp cycling, honestly, but I do like to get that in play. And in the late game, it's fantastic. You can pretty well keep your opponent's creatures under control so that you can attack through with that no problem. And if they do get a kill for it, in the late game, you're going to be able to kind of recur it with Grim Harvest. And I'll show you that, and you'll see it in the game later on. But it's really a fantastic 2 combo. It's nice to have the Mull Drifter beat down, but you'll be here forever just doing these 2. So if you have the Twisted Abomination, you can really get that 5 damage in. So now let's take a quick look at the land package. I don't usually talk about it. Kind of an interesting one. This is kind of the same guy if you checked out my videos on the Esper Pauper deck. Mine was a variant of a deck created by this guy as well, or at least played by this guy to success. And it had kind of a similar mana base where it is running both 4 Terramorphics and 4 Evolving Wilds. There's a lot of tap lands. It also runs 2 Bogs. It runs 4 of the Ravnica lands. These are very heavy as far as tapped lands. Halimar Depths as well. All come into play tap, but you do have some nice things going on here. The Evolving Wilds will allow you to, as well as the Terramorphics, shuffle up what is shown to you by the Halimar Depths, to allow you to see what you have there. If you don't like what you see, you can shuffle those away. Even if you have drawn out all of your basic lands, you can still use the Evolving Wilds and the Terramorphics to shuffle your deck. So that's nice. With the Aqueducts, it's good you have the opportunity to bounce the Depths and the Bogs, and reuse those repeatedly. I really have started to love running the Bog in tournament play, in competitive matches. There are a lot of things that these Bogs can get rid of. It gets rid of accumulated knowledge for mono blue matchup. It gets rid of a lot of things for the Is It matchup. All the flashback cards they have available, as well as removing possible targets for their recursion. With the wall. It works great if you're playing Hounds, because it forces them to remove creatures from their graveyard and not allowed to bring them back later on. I think it's kind of an underestimated card. I think I've seen a couple Pauper decks nowadays running that as a one-of. It really kind of messes with strategies, and I don't think a lot of people consider how effective that card can be until they have kind of faced it head on. So that saying that, let's take a look at the sideboard real quick. There is an Augur of Skulls here, which is fantastic, and actually, now that I'm looking at it, what is missing from this is there is a single Augur of Skulls. I don't know where he got to, but I swear that he is here. There he is. Okay, Augur of Skulls. There is a single Augur of Skulls. Another interesting choice, but again, gives you opportunities to creature control your opponent. So kind of an interesting sideboard. I'm not sure I would have put this together. Again, running this, I might make some other choices. Does have another Augur of Skulls, great for the control matchup. You have to consider that you come into the control matchup, you are running very heavy creature kill. And if you're facing, let's say, Izzet control, for example, they are very light on the creature base, sometimes running as little as 4 creatures, 4 Maul Drifters. So bringing out a lot of the stuff like Spinning Darkness, you want to take that out. And you're going to have a lot of open spaces. And, you'll bring in the 3 negates, you'll bring in the 2 duress. Augur of Skulls is a nice one to have in there to kind of kill them off as well. I think the deep analysis is interesting. I guess that would be brought in if you're finding yourself in the mono black matchup. That will give you a bit of an edge against all that discard, especially since you're going to lose so many cards to the fact that you cannot kill black creatures. There's a Doomblade in the sideboard that too is useless in that matchup. But you do have the duress. The Hydroblasts are good for the goblins matchup. Nausea is another one. If this deck is just, it's pretty silly if you find yourself against the matchup for Storm, because you have 4 Echoing Decays in the main deck, you have 2 Nauseas in the sideboard, you have negates. You can bring this kind of stuff in place of like the Innocent Blood, and now you're sitting with 6 answers to, just off these 6 answers to the goblin tokens. And it's just kind of silly. This deck does have a pretty good matchup against that, but yeah, this is the sideboard. I might make some changes. You don't have a lot of answers for the Affinity matchup, where you would want to bring out the Darknesses, because they run into a lot of 4 toughness creatures there as well. But let's take a look at a couple of games here. So game 1. We're looking at this hand, and it's good, not great. It is a bit heavy on the lands. A lot of times you will start with an opening hand where you do not have an untapped land on your first turn. So we aren't going to be able to get that turn 1 Fume Spitter into play. It really would have been the ideal choice, but since it is not available, you want to be able to do, you will want to start with the Evolving Wilds, keep the Bog in hand for later on. You can search out the swamp with this Evolving Wilds, and you can use the Bog later if it's a good thing for this matchup. We don't know yet going into this what my opponent is playing, but you want to be able to have that available. Blue comes down, Preordain, so this could be, at this point in time, you're thinking mono blue control or Izzet control, which are usually creature light and not a great matchup for this deck. But we can get the Fume Spitter into play before we use the Aqueduct to return the swamp. So Lonely Sandbar comes down. Now we definitely know my opponent is playing the mono blue control deck. And here's an interesting choice. He actually Piracy Charms the Fume Spitter. Now I think this is kind of an interesting card to have main deck. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, anyone, feel free, but I feel like that's usually a sideboard option for the mono blue control. It's not a great card. It does allow for a couple kills on spells like the Fume Spitter, but I didn't think the Fume Spitter would have a lot of use in this matchup anyways. So I'm going to throw down the Evolving Wilds. He knows I have a swamp in hand, but I really wanted to kind of use it to fetch out some of that land. Now I do make a misplay here. I used it to fetch an island. Now this was silly. This deck really wants heavier on the black mana. So you wanted to fetch out a swamp. That would also allow you to have the Snuff Out open and available for play. But my opponent doesn't make a play on his turn, so now I'm able to drop my swamp and I have open mana and I can cast the Snuff Out. I don't have to pay the 4 life at this point in time. And since we are playing mono blue control, you want to look for every opportunity you have against this deck when he has tapped out lands, or to discard cards from his hand. These, play smart around counter control. You just want to know what you can and cannot play. So Delver comes down, and one benefit to this matchup, the deck we're running is very creature control heavy. Our opponent is running heavy counter spells with few creatures, so the only benefit that grants us is that we can cast multiple creature control spells, and there will always be lots to come back. We probably have enough to go through a lot of his counter spells and kill off his creatures still. So he does let Echoing Decay land, which I am surprised because he had 3 mana open. My only thoughts there are that maybe it was a Force Spike at this point in time. Something along those lines where I had mana open and could have paid to counter that. Condescend would have been the same thing, but that's not usually something you see in this matchup. So we do play the Bog just because I don't want to miss the mana drop. There's not a lot that he could get with his graveyard. He does have the Una's Grace that it will be good to get rid of, and he will cast that at this point in time. It's an interesting thing. You won't run into wall very much with this deck, but you can use it to kind of mess up strategies that people didn't really consider that it would be a problem. Stuff like the Una's Grace. You can get those out of play. So if this resolves, let's get rid of this here. My opponent is also tapped out at this point in time. Like I said, you just want to, every time my opponent taps out with mono blue and like a little flag goes up, a little red light in my head, just a warning to let me know, hey, he's tapped out, I can free cast. Not so important there because it is, his turn now, but just like I said, every time it comes up, I make a note of it, and I really want to focus. So now I have Probe, and I know this is going to draw a counterspell. That's kind of the intention at this point in time. If it doesn't, great. I can clear out some of this creature control. And we see he does draw a Force Spike. And I really think he had that earlier on to protect the Delver, but because I had 2 lands on tap, he wouldn't really be able to play that. So end of turn, he does play Accumulated Knowledge, and this is another thing we were talking about, the Bog and strategies you don't realize it'll mess up. With the Bog, you're able to remove Accumulated Knowledge from the graveyard, so each one, it kind of just ruins his draw engine, really. So he plays Gush to return for the cost of returning 2 islands, which will still allow him to replay one of those. It's a pretty good draw spell if you know how to use it and if you're careful about it. At this point in time, he's still got 2 mana untapped, he's 7 cards in hand, you're thinking counterspell. I still really don't have a play, I'm sitting on a lot of creature kill, but we will use that Terramorphic Toothed In land out. So now my opponent's turn hits another land drop. They really don't, mono blue doesn't really need a lot of mana. I'm going to try and get the Fume Spitter out, and this is kind of an interesting thing. Like, this is really kind of a big beater at this point in the game. My opponent is sitting with 4 untapped lands, 7 cards in hand, he has a counterspell, and now he's sitting at, do I waste the counterspell on this 1-cost, 1/1 creature? If it's a Force Spike, he can't use it. He has to use something bigger than even a mana drain, like a counterspell. He would have to hard counter it, and it just doesn't seem worth it. But it does allow me to get this into the play, and odds are there are very little in the way of kill spells that mono blue has available to them. Serrated Arrow's Piracy Charm, which I said is not usually in decked. So I have this little guy in the field, and he actually becomes kind of a critical creature because, in 20 turns, this will be game. That may sound a little ridiculous to you, but it is something that is important to note. So he plays Oracle, 2 lands open, still available for counterspell, but again, I'm sitting on a hand where 4 out of 5 cards are kill spells, and I do have the opportunity. I could, if worst comes to worst, sacrifice the Fume Spitter, and then he's just got a 0/2 wall. But I do have the available mana, so I can hardcast Snuff Out as well, to try and kill off creatures. And I do kill it off, he doesn't even try to counter it. Again, if it was a Force Spike, I have 1 untapped land, and that would have stopped him. But now I've cleared the way for my little Fume Spitter to really dominate. So here again, Bog's coming down, and kind of the big thing this is going to get rid of is the Accumulated Knowledge, so it will decrease his draw. Let me get that out of there. Now we can swing for 1. Like I said, now we're at 19 turns and my opponent is gone. Fume Spitters also work great for kind of cannon fodder for your Innocent Blood. If you need to use that, it's a pretty easy trade to pay 1 and sacrifice this little 1/1 creature. So now I'm sitting across from the Golem. I am going to have the opportunity to kill it. Again, many spells in hand. I can't really use Echoing Decay to finish it. I could, if I had to, use Consume Spirit, but you really want to kind of hold that for the final blow. So my opponent finally plays a counterspell, gets a negate, and I'm feeling kind of good about this matchup. He hasn't drawn as many, or at least played as many counterspells as you usually run into with the mono blue control matchup. So now I am gonna use the Innocent Blood to force him to sacrifice the Golem, and I'm pretty okay with trading the Fume Spitter for it. And I also have the mana still available to me to cast Probe. Almost 90% of the time, at the very least, you want to be able to cast Probe with the kicker. And here it's another opportunity for me to try and draw a counterspell from my opponent, which it will get. He plays a Deprive, and this is kind of what I was thinking. I did feel that he had counterspell in his hand. I just wasn't quite sure what he was waiting for. But at this point in time, I am able to, at least get that out of his hand. It does allow him an engine to return the sandbar to hand and draw off it, but kind of the more important thing is the fact that he had to waste a counterspell. So there goes another accumulated knowledge. You realize, again, the bogs came down, kind of screwed up with that. Now he puts a quicksand, and this is kind of an interesting thing. This will actually screw up most of our aggro in this deck, but we do have Muldrifter, which will be the only thing to be able to get around that. So here again, we're playing the depths, and we have an opportunity where you see that it was an Innocent Blood and 2 lands. Now what I can do is put these in order so that the Terramorphic Expanse is at the top, and on my next turn that will be the card I draw. This will allow me to use the Terramorphic to shuffle my deck, even if I had all of my basic lands in play. You want to be able to put Terramorphic down so you can shuffle away what you just found with your depths. I really didn't need the Innocent Blood. I really didn't need the other Dimir land. Sure, returning the Bog is a nice thing. Returning the Depths is also a nice thing, but at this point in the game, we really need a creature. So second accumulated knowledge comes down, and now we definitely want to look forward to that opportunity to bring a Bog back to the hand. Spire Golem comes down. Don't have a kill right now unless I use Consume Spirit, but I'm still at 20 life. I'm more than happy to let the 2 damage come across a couple times in order to get this even. I did take a considering moment on whether to kill it, and then I realized that you don't want to be too aggressive with your kill spells. You can take some damage. We try to play Augur of Skulls again, discard. He really wants to get rid of it, so he's going to use a counterspell to stop that. We're more than happy to let him. He's still sitting at 5 cards in hand, 6 now. I'm assuming some of it is land, because they like to try and bluff sometimes, but any counter spells we can get rid of, we want to get rid of. And a lot of your discard spells, the Probes, the Augur, the Necrosages, those will draw those counter spells. So here he taps 4, and you're thinking, well, the Golem comes in for free now. So he's playing Serrated Arrows. Not a good thing for me to see, but we do have some options against that. Nothing to kill it, but as far as creature recursion, we do have a couple options available. So now we draw a Spitting Darkness, which is great, especially in the mid-game here, where I can easily remove 3 cards from my graveyard to get that to play for free. But it is not so great in the fact that it's only going to do 3 damage. My opponent's sitting on this much untapped mana, and he's got 4 cards in hand. He's going to have a counterspell, so not only am I going to need multiples to kill it, I probably will need even more than that because of the counterspells. But drawing to the Necrosages, at this point in time, it's a tough call whether you want to make them discard or draw cards. Drawing is a fantastic thing at this point, but I feel that the better play is to play it as a discard spell. Try and force your opponent to either discard or waste the counterspell to stop that. And we see here he is removing his graveyard up to the accumulated knowledge, and what that tells us is that we will be hitting a Logic Knot. That's usually a one of in the mono blue decks. It's kind of a nice one, I guess. Not my favorite, but he does have enough to remove it and cause it to have to pay 7, which I am not going to use. But again, any opportunity we can get rid of a counterspell, that's fantastic. He's now down to 3 cards in hand, and the less cards he has, the better off we are. So we're going to play the Crypt Rats, and this is going to give us an opportunity to kill the Spire Golem if he does not counterspell it. He does counterspell. His only option if it came into play, he would use Serrated Arrows, but in response to that going on the stack, I would be able to sacrifice the Crypt Rats and do 5 damage to wipe the board. But eating up another counterspell, as always. Still looking for an answer, and we have a lot of options as far as creature kill goes. This is very heavy on the creature kill. It's a little harder because you are running 4 of the Spitting Darkness, and the Spire Golem gets past that. But in a matchup like this, you have an opponent who's running very few creatures, so you'll have creatures that kill that you draw, and every opportunity to actually play it. So things aren't looking great here. I'm down to 8. I do have the option, I'm sure you guys have noticed, I can still play the Consume Spirit to try and kill it. I can use Echoing Decay in addition to Spitting Darkness, but I'm really concerned about the fact that he's got all this untapped mana and 3 cards in hand, I'm really hoping to draw into something else to give me another opportunity to kill this and get around a counterspell, which I'm guaranteeing you he's going to have. So we draw an Aqueduct, and I have a choice. I could get the Bog back to get rid of these 2 accumulated knowledges, but I really need an answer for this Golem, so I return the Depths to my hand. So now I get kind of the answer I need. I can play Innocent Blood for 1 and have plenty of mana open to play something else if this gets countered. Which he does. You know, I'm still sitting kind of pretty. I'm at 6 life, and I've really grown to a point in my Magic career, so to say, where I've understand a little better how much life you cannot take, and that's really a great thing as far as elevating you to the next play level, in my opinion. So we get some creature kill. The other Consumed Spirit is there, as well as a Spinning Darkness. We'll put that on top, and I know next turn I can either use Echoing Decay in combination with a single Spinning Darkness, or if he does not have a counterspell and lets both Spinning Darkness go through, then I can just gain life and kill it that way. That's kind of part of the reason why I'm okay with taking so much life here, is the fact that I know I have some life gain options in the Spinning Darkness and the Consumed Spirit. So we play Spinning Darkness. It automatically removes the cards. You don't have to click anything. And he lets that one go through. I attempt the second one to kill it, and now he's going to be able to use the counterspell. You know, it's one of these things where if you're him, you definitely don't want to counter the first one because it is not going to kill your creature. You know, someone could try and bluff you and only have one in hand and force the counterspell. So you definitely want to wait till it's actually absolutely necessary for you to use it. In response to the counterspell, I get an Echoing Decay. He still had 3 cards in hand, so there was a good chance that he had a counterspell, but he does not play one, so the Golem will die. Kind of really eating up my hand advantage here, but you know, you do what you have to, and I really needed to clear the board against that. So draw the second Consumed Spirit. At this point in time, I could play it and get 2, 6, 7, 8 damage in. It is at 19, so 8 damage really isn't my ideal at this point in time. I will use this to get my life going again. I do have, you know, a later on option to cast it again for 8. You know, again, offering up bait to the counterspell as well. You know, I still have Mulldrifters in here to get my hand back. He plays the Mana Leak, knowing I have 3 mana, so I of course tap to play it. And I'm assuming again he's got something else, and it is Force Spike. So I do have to kind of use it to eat up counterspells, but it frees up an opportunity later on for me to use Consumed Spirit. I'm also in a position now where my opponent is at 19 cards in deck, so he has to really kind of be aware of the fact that I may deck him out at this point in time. So Delver comes down, use Echoing Decay to attempt to kill it. Just again, he's at 2 cards in hand, really want to just eat up counterspells if possible. If not, I'm killing the Delver, and there's no downside to that situation, really. Pass the turn here. You see again my opponent is going down in cards. He gets the second Delver into play. He's finally reached that point where he hasn't played anything but 1 Delver prior to last turn, so he still has 1 more in those 18 cards. Excuse me. So I do get the Mulldrifter. Finally I can play that and draw cards. You do have to be aware late game as well. Opportunities for you yourself to run into decking problems. So I will cast Probe in an attempt to draw counterspells and just get rid of these 2 cards in my opponent's hand. He does not play a counterspell, so he's willing to get rid of whatever those 2 cards are. I get rid of the mana, and it turns out he had 2 lands as well, and he was just bluffing me the whole time. So, I mean, it's kind of expected, just due to the fact that he wasn't countering any of those spells. And you see I made another misplay here. I tapped out to play the Probe, and left myself 3 black mana. What I really needed was 2 black and 1 blue. So that was another mistake. You know, something to just be aware of. You gotta, you know, be smart about these. Now, with so much cards in the graveyard, I have an opportunity again, easily play Spinning Darkness for free, and it will hit the Delver. So he draws into a Lonely Sandbar, cycles it. Now I'm sitting pretty good. I have the Necro Sages in hand. Since he's only 1 card, I'm going to use it as draw for myself. If he has a counterspell, he can feel free to counter it. If not, I'm drawing cards, and that's great. Now I draw also the Grim Harvest, which is going to be great because he's going to be able to kill off my Mulldrifter with the Serrated Arrows, and then I can later on have the opportunity to bring it back. So here again, I'm running a situation where I could use it to get rid of. The only thing in his grave worth killing is there are 2 accumulated knowledge. but I decide not to. If he does draw into the fourth and final accumulated knowledge at this point, it's going to just help me as far as decking him out. It's not really my ideal win condition, but it is a win condition. I choose to bounce the depth, instead, to get that, extra rearrange going, and I have an Evolving Wilds. So if I don't like what I see, I can always change that up. And I said again, you have the ability to, even if you have played all your basic lands, use the Evolving Wilds to shuffle your deck. Here, so he finally kills the Muldrifter. He's used all of the tokens off the arrows, and now I can play the Grim Harvest end of turn, so I have that mana available later. And now I get the second Muldrifter. I'm also sitting at 17. I'm only 2 cards ahead of him after some of this draw, so now I do have to be aware of how many cards I'm drawing. The Muldrifters will kind of, screw me later on if I deck myself, so you kind of want to play them only as needed. I'm going to play one and just keep that one in play as long as possible, hoping not to have to play the second. So you see there, a million things going on in the mid-game. Depths goes down, there were 2 lands and an Echoing Decay. Now I have, no choice. I can't Evolving Wilds until next turn. I have to play a Muldrifter. If I want to play a Muldrifter, at least on this turn, I have to draw those 2 cards. So that's okay. It does get me Echoing Decay if he does find himself with that extra Delver. Then I'm sitting pretty good. So I have to draw those 3 horrible cards, but I do have the opportunity, again, like I said, to play one of the Terramorphics to shuffle the deck up. I see, again, F6ing past my turn. Not great. At this point in time, what I was thinking, I was a little concerned about my decking and my drawing myself out, but I can, like I said, I was not thinking clearly. I can just play the Terramorphic, sacrifice it to search my library, and then choose not to actually put a card into play. So now we draw the Twisted Abomination, which is a great thing for the mid to late game. It's not really something you want to see very early on, but in this deck, at this point in time, I'll tap the 3 Ravnica lands. I can get that into play, and it's really gonna help me finish this game before I deck out. At this point in time, he does have 2 Quicksands, which will kill it, but I still have the Grim Harvest and the ability to bring it back. You're in the late game at this point in time. I have the ability to have mana open to recur that Grim Harvest. So, Accumulated Knowledge number 4 finally comes out. He's now drawn himself down to 9 cards. Like I said, I was a little okay with letting him do that, just to kind of get him more towards that win condition. But he does draw into the Spire Golem, does get his other Delver of Secrets. And I am going to be able to at least kill the Delver with the Echoing Decay. No Counterspell again. I'm thinking at this point in time he's pretty well used up with counterspells, and I know I have an opportunity. I can cast this last Snuff out for free, as far as getting it around counterspells. And he also made a mistake here. He tapped out a Quicksand to make those plays. I'm not really sure why he did that, because it would have given him the opportunity to kill this Twisted Abomination right away. But since he did tap it, I will be able to swing through with the Twisted Abomination and get that 5 damage on the stack. So he gets another arrows. There are usually 2 of them. He will be able to kill another Muldrifter, but all that's going to do is give me the opportunity to get Grim Harvest back. So we're going to try and get as much damage in as possible. He's got a 3rd Quicksand now. He's going to be able to kill the Abomination. The Muldrifter is only going to hit for 1 after that. But like I said, the Abomination dying, you can't regenerate it because these are minus effects and not kill effects. So he's going to die, but it is going to cause the Grim Harvest to trigger, and we can get that back. I've drawn into Muldrifter number 3, and again, I'm sitting at 10 cards in deck, 11 actually, but, I'm at that point in time where I do not really want to play a Muldrifter unless I have to, because I'm getting so close to decking myself out. Now, I think I again made a misplay there. I could have used Grim Harvest to get the Twisted Abomination back and recast it that turn so that I could attack on the following turn. What I've set myself up for here was to cast Grim Harvest at the end of my opponent's turn to get this back, and then replay it on the following turn. So it would have taken a turn longer to win this game because of Summoning Sickness. Just another misstep that I made in this game. The Muldrifter would have died. He had 2 counters left on the arrows, but I have the recursion with the the Abomination at least, and I would have been able to win this anyways. What I also did by screwing this up is allow my opponent the opportunity to draw another card, which gives him yet another opportunity to get a counterspell for that Grim Harvest. Something you really don't want to do. Be aware of your choices in your opponent's decks and try not to get into plays like that. Okay, so we're sitting down for game number 2, and this is a pretty great hand. No early game plays really, but you will have a Necrosages that you can get out on turn 3. You do have Grim Harvest, and we saw last game how great that can be. Muldrifter for draw, Probes for discarding for your opponent. Spinning Darkness is not a great card to see early game, but you will eventually get the cards you need to really make that come in for free. And at the worst case, it becomes an easy discard for Probe in the early game. So we, of course, start with the Terramorphic into Evolving Wilds. My opponent's first card is Ancient Springs, so immediately know that he is playing a Storm deck. Win condition either focusing on the Grape Shot or the Empty the Warrens. Not a great matchup for most decks, but the black does give you an advantage. Right now, my strategy in the early game with this hand is going to be discard. If you can kind of mess with your opponent's hand and you want to screw up what he has so you force him to wait longer before he can combo out. The other thing is, if you have this deck does have the Echoing Decays, and you have the option to kill those off if you have it in hand. But right now I'm trying to stall till I draw one of those Echoing Decays, and I'm going to use every opportunity available to me to cast the Necrosages on turn 3 to get that discard going. And like I said, it's going to really force him to stall out. These decks usually cannot go off until turn 3, especially this version with these lands. I won't necessarily speak for the other, because I know the Kiln Fiend one has killed me on turn 2. But, excuse me, this deck will draw into issues and will not be able to play until turn 3 to successfully get his deck rolling. When he does get to the point where he has casted Empty the Warrens, if you do not have an Echoing Decay, your only hope is that he does not have the Bushwhacker for the win. If he does not have the Bushwhacker, then you have at least one extra turn to draw into the Echoing Decay. Really, the ideal situation is to have an Echoing Decay in hand and 2 mana open and available. When you get to turn 2, if you do have the Bushwhacker come into play, you want to have the 2 lands untapped and available to cast that Echoing Decay. So right here, my only play, I'm of course going to play Necrosages again, choosing discard to force my opponent to kind of readjust his strategy and wait perhaps a little longer before he can combo out. Do get rid of Locust Petal, does get rid of Rites of Flame. Not, killer things for him to lose, but still, every little bit counts. So I get these cards. I have no real play here, but I'm going to evoke the Muldrifter. I said I was trying to draw into the Echoing Decay, and this is my only real play here. I can't cast Probe until turn 5. I'm getting some kill spells, nothing really great. Innocent Blood is not going to help you out, especially, like I said, if he's able to get haste on those Goblin tokens. So, sitting here, I'm a little worried, but he does pass the turn again. My discard did manage to slow him down, and I do have an untapped land, so I don't have to worry about not having mana to cast Probe. These decks will bring in Duress usually for the sideboard. I guess on occasion they do run a main deck, but other than that, they don't have any kind of counterspell, a real answer for what you have built around the combo. So we can cast Probe here and know it's going to hit. I use it to get rid of the Spinning Darkness, like I said. Not a great thing in the early game. I guess I could have used it to cast away 2 other black cards and then use the Darkness to gain 3 life and perhaps prevent the win. Something to consider if you're giving this deck a chance. Perhaps a better move. We see here he does actually discard and Empty the Warrens, which number 1 tells me he has a second one in hand, but it does reduce the number of opportunities he has to make this work. So he is going to attempt to combo off on this turn, and I'm going to just hit play to let this go through. And again, at this point in time, I have the Echoing Decay, but I am tapped out, so my only hope is that he does not have the haste on these goblins. And even if he did at this point in time, you'll see that he did not have enough to finish me off. And my turn comes, Echoing Decay, like I said, they're not usually running any counterspells. They will bring in Duress from the sideboard if it is not main deck. To get rid of this kind of thing, but having that card in hand, you're drawing to it. You wanted to discard at every opportunity, just whatever you can to screw up his hand and not allow him to combo off. So, Echoing Decay is going to wipe out all these goblins, and he has no choice but to concede. He's got no lands, he's going to have no permanents, and only cards in hand. By the time he manages to ramp up his hand back to the point in time where he could combo off again, it's going to be too late. He may be dead. If he is not dead, then he has a chance, but honestly, against this deck, he would not have a chance because I would have that much time to draw out another Echoing Decay or, other discard spells to just slow him up. So, if you get that Echoing Decay, and you've seen me play this deck several times in this article series and whatnot, you get the Echoing Decay, you face this deck, and as soon as it comes out, they concede because there's nothing they can do about it. It really is just game over.